I'm Lori Daybrow, co-chair for JNF's Women for Israel chapter in Eastern Pennsylvania. And myself and co-chair Jackie Danilevitz, who you will hear from later in the program, along with our fellow Women for Israel committee members, are excited to welcome you all to our second installment in our series From Our Jewish Home to Our Jewish Homeland, where we'll be making connections between businesses and people in our area and various programs within Jewish National Fund. We've been looking forward to this virtual event since this summer. Our committee had a socially distant meeting in Jackie's backyard, and Andrea Gottlieb, one of our committee members, had the idea to give this From Our Jewish Home to Our Jewish Homeland series its name. It was also her idea to reach out to a current Alexander Muss High School and Israel educator, Danny Stein, for an enjoyable and educational event. Lucky for us, he agreed. So you're all in for a treat with the presentation that Danny has in store for us. Before I introduce Danny, I'd like to welcome Marina Furman, Executive Director of National Donor Advancement, who will recognize two important ladies on our Women for Israel committee for their recent contributions to JNF's campaign. Marina.
Thank you, Lori, so much. And before I introduce and thank our newest member of Women's Sapphire Society, I would like to thank Lori Daybrow and Jackie Danilevitz for co-chairing and working extremely hard to bring this wonderful, heartwarming, and taste buds warming event to fruition. And I would also like to thank Samantha Van Adelsberg, our director of Philadelphia, for being professional and on this event and working and creating it together with wonderful co-chairs, Lori and Jackie, and our committee members. And now I would love to welcome to our Sapphire Society two newest members, but two women who've been involved with JNF for a long time, Andrea Gottlieb and Andy Barsky, who this year for the first time committed $5,000. Actually, it's second year for Andy, but it didn't happen during non-pandemic times. So we all are excited to have big or small dinner together, give them their beautiful sapphire pins. And Sapphire is a society for women who give $5,000 and up to support Jewish National Fund. Thank you again, Andrea and Andy, and welcome. Lori, back to you.
Thank you, Marina. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker for the evening, Alexander Muss High School in Israel educator, Danny Stein. Danny is a former Philadelphian, an alumni of AMHSI, having attended the school during 11th grade. Now Danny teaches a wide range of classes that cover Jewish history from the Bible until today, with classes taking place in the classroom and on the ground in Israel. So ladies and gentlemen, live from Israel, we have Danny Stein. Welcome.
Danny, I think you're a little muted there. So if you don't mind putting up your volume, we should be good to go. I can't hear you yet. Thanks everyone for bearing with us. We're just making sure we're on with the volume. Looks like Danny's going to log back in just a moment. And thank you so much for your patience. I think, I would blame the winter storm, but I know that there wasn't any snow in Israel recently. So maybe that's not the case there, but hopefully everyone is not as packed in into their snowbanks as the rest of us are. I know here in Center City, it has not been the best. But again, not an excuse for our friends in Israel. So we'll be logging Danny on in just a moment. So thanks so much for your patience.
Oh, technology.
And Danny is back on. Thank you. And looks like we are just waiting for.
Okay, sorry. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Yay.
Well, I'm so sorry, but it says I was unmuted the entire time. I have no idea what just happened. That was crazy. So I apologize. I'm so sorry. I just need to be able to share my screen. Sherry, can I share my screen, please? Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm sorry for that weird technological problem. But I'm going to get you guys now to Tel Aviv. You can see I'm here coming at you from the beach in Tel Aviv. It looks like this even at midnight in Israel, believe it or not. But I want to take you guys on an amazing virtual tour here of Israel, specifically the Shuk in Tel Aviv. So I'm just going to share my screen and we're going to begin. Let's get going. So the first thing that we're going to do, especially, I don't know for you guys, but I haven't been on a plane in quite some time. So I'm going to invite you guys to come with me to a place that we all know and love, and that's Philadelphia International Airport. Okay, I haven't been there at this point a year and a half. It's the longest time I've ever been away from Philadelphia International Airport. But you guys, come on my shuttle, come to the airport. Let's get on this gorgeous El Al plane. You're lucky when you travel with me. I actually get everybody an upgrade. So this is going to be where we're seated for this flight. For the next 12 hours, we're going to be in these gorgeous, amazing seats. No expense. That's on me, okay? For that little technological problem with the sound. Anyway, let's get going. Let's land in Israel. And we're here. We've arrived, guys, so quickly. That was amazing. I want to invite everyone to get into the spirit, please. Everyone, wherever you are, please bend down and kiss the ground wherever you are just to get, okay, you don't really have to. You don't really have to. But I do want to remind everyone that once upon a time here in Israel, we used to get to do this, and it was really an amazing moment, although not lately. Anyway, I want to take us straight to the Shuk in Tel Aviv. So let's go to the Shuk HaCarmel in Tel Aviv. Take a look. Don't be afraid, guys. This picture was taken before the pandemic. That's why you see so crowded and no masks. But this is what this place looks like on a normal day. And the truth is, when we're not in lockdown, it looks about half like this also, even nowadays, which is still pretty amazing. The Shuk in Tel Aviv, guys, the Shuk HaCarmel has some of the most amazing, colorful, incredible things to eat. You can all remember, guys, Israeli gummy foods, which are incredible. The best dried fruit in the entire world. Unbelievably incredible vegetables, which are exported to the rest of the world. And we actually, the amazing Israeli produce, in fact, is actually the less good produce, because the best stuff is all sold to Europe, and it's still pretty incredible. And the Shuk has, I mean, you go to a place like this, whether it be in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, they're practically giving it away. These things are the prices are just unbelievable. The food is so fresh and so good. I want to give a little bit of background to Tel Aviv, just a tiny, tiny bit. This is the founding of Tel Aviv. Maybe some of you have seen this famous picture. This took place in 1909. So just 110 years ago. Tel Aviv, which is now this bustling metropolis, looked like this. This was Tel Aviv 110 years ago, which was essentially nothing but sand dunes. Pretty remarkable. And this is the founding, a very, very famous story where actually they had a little child picking up black shells and white shells. The black shells had family names on it. The white shells had plot numbers. The little kid would go, they said, hey, pick a black shell, pick a white shell. Everybody then, and the little kid would get up and he'd say, okay, Stein family, take your plot number 7 and go begin to build your home. And that's how they actually originally founded Tel Aviv in 1909. What's amazing is that after it got off the ground, there was a few people living there. And then some investors from outside the country decided to buy, I want a piece of land in this old new land, the Holy Land. A lot of these Russian Jews. And so a lot of Russian Jews actually bought a little piece of land in this, little startup. It's amazing because now Tel Aviv is like the Silicon Valley of the Middle East. It's, you know, Israel's a startup nation. At this point, it was a nothing. It was a backwater sand dune. That's it. And what happened with these Russian Jews and what made the shuk really take off, and when this says in Hebrew, it says, you can barely see it, but it says shuk leyirakot, the vegetable market. Well, when does this get here? In the Russian Revolution, these Russian Jews essentially luckily they survived these horrible pogroms, but they were left basically without any property. And so luckily they had, you know, a few years earlier brought this, you know, random sand dune in Israel. We might as well move there now. And that's when Tel Aviv really starts getting off the ground in a bigger way. And that's when the shuk of Carmel, the Carmel market becomes kind of like the beginning of the shuk that we know. Okay, when these Russian, basically refugees from the Russian Revolution show up. And then the shuk of Carmel becomes this place that's really been with Israel throughout all of these amazing, you know, unbelievably tense, incredible, difficult, amazing moments that we've been through. So this picture is amazing. This picture was taken in 1948, during the 1948 War of Independence. And in the middle, again, that's why it's so blurry. It's not a high-res image, but it says sakana, danger. And it's telling people to walk only on the sides. And why is that? Because during the war, this place, which you can still see, this is the Hassan Bek Mosque, which is not far from the shuk, although now there's some skyscrapers in between. But there was actually a sniper position at the top of the minaret. And so people were actually shot at from this sniper position. So they told people, look, there was no supermarket at the time. So you still had to get your food somewhere. You still had to get your vegetables somewhere. And so they put a big sign in the middle, says danger, walk on the sides, not in the middle, so nothing happens to you. But this was this was the shuk in 1948. Then we have the 1950s. So Israel wins the War of Independence. We beat 7 Arab armies against all odds. It's incredible. We win the War of Independence, and then something incredible happens, whereas the population of Israel actually doubles in the first 3 years. Okay, we have the beginning of the kibbutz galuyot, the ingathering of the exiles, immigrants coming from all over the world, and Tel Aviv really blows up at this point with huge population. This is probably my favorite picture of the shuk in Tel Aviv. Okay, it says here on the right side, it says of tari latinok, fresh chicken for your baby. And look down here at the bottom right at this chicken that they're referring to, and imagine feeding that to your little baby. This non-refrigerated chicken with the feet still on. This was Israel in the 1950s. It's funny because my wife feeds to our kids, like, you know, imported almond milk, only organic, straight out of, you know, the Israeli equivalent of Whole Foods. But in Israel in the 1950s, people were eating, this was what they were feeding their children, this disgusting unrefrigerated chicken that's been sitting out all day. But that was the shuk in Israel in the beginning of the country in the 1950s. I want to take us now and introduce a few. The way I'm going to do this today is we're going to introduce a few foods that come from 4 different countries. And I'll explain kind of about the food, about the country a little bit, and about the Jewish community, and something that I think is, you know, interesting that a lot of people maybe don't know about Jews from these various lands. So I'm going to start actually with Egypt. Okay, so what you're looking at here, it says hummus over here. This is a hummus shop. But if you look inside, it actually looks like a synagogue. And that's because in the middle of the market, once upon a time was a synagogue. It's no longer a synagogue. It's now an Egyptian hummus restaurant. But it's amazing that this place, and you can go there, you can sit in this place that looks just like a synagogue and eat your hummus. A lot of people, in fact, don't know the proper way to eat hummus. So I'm gonna actually have someone explain to you right now, which hopefully will open your eyes and really change the way you eat hummus, maybe forever.
So we take our hand like this.
So I hope everybody understood that, and you get the angles right next time, okay, with that wrist action. A lot of people don't know that about eating hummus, but you need that special wrist action, okay? But anyway, so we're talking about Egypt now for a few minutes, and the fact is there's many Jews that came from Egypt in the 1950s. I just want to talk about three topics that have to do with Egyptian Jews in Egypt that a lot of people don't know about. And the first one, in fact, is this. The first one is that in the 1950s, a lot of people don't know this story, but in fact, there was a huge group of Nazi scientists who moved to Egypt. They didn't finish the job, of course, in Europe, thank God. And they actually wanted money, but they also wanted a chance to continue to hurt Jews, even after Israel was created and long after World War II and after the Holocaust. So Nazi scientists came to Egypt with the goal of helping the Egyptians build a long-range missile project. And Israel's Mossad, our famed CIA, one of the best, if not the best, intelligence agencies in the entire world, one of their first major strategic threats we had to deal with was Nazi scientists in Egypt designing long-range missiles for Israel. Well, if you know anything about the Mossad, you know that we don't take any garbage from anybody. And so there was a lot that went on with these Nazi scientists, both because they were Nazis and because they were still trying to harm us. And eventually this Egyptian long-range missile project designed by Nazis eventually completely fell through. Thank you to David Ben-Gurion over here and Israel's Mossad. I also want to mention that Eli Cohen. Eli Cohen, if you saw the Netflix the Netflix drama, The Spy this year, that dramatized Eli Cohen. Eli Cohen is the greatest spy in Israel's history. I'm not going to tell his story now. It would take me at least half an hour to do it justice. But let's just say he ends up becoming the deputy defense minister of Syria, and in many ways saving Israel in the 6-Day War. He did so many incredible things. But a lot of people think that he was, don't realize maybe he was a Syrian Jew. He was actually an Egyptian Jew that used his command of Arabic that he knew because he grew up in Egypt as a child, and his command, of course, his knowledge of Arab culture to fit in seamlessly in Damascus. And of course, this is a picture of Eli Cohen, the spy who saved Israel in Damascus in the lead up to the 6-Day War. And finally, I just want to mention one more thing about Egypt before we move on, and that is, of course, this amazing, famous picture, right? This is Menachem Begin, our prime minister, shaking the hand of Anwar Sadat, the president of Egypt. Here's Jimmy Carter in the middle. Of course, this is the Camp David Accords, which was the first peace treaty that Israel ever signed with an Arab country in 1979. And that's amazing, especially, I bring it up now, first of all, because Egyptian hummus, but second of all, because this year we had this incredible situation where all of a sudden 5 more Arab countries made peace with Israel. And it's easy to forget that the first time that happened, what really broke the initial barrier was Egypt in 1979 as kind of a result and a benefit of Israel's victory in the Yom Kippur War. So I want to move on now from Egypt, and I want to now go to the country of Yemen. I'm going to talk about Yemen. I'm going to introduce my favorite character in Shukka Carmel. Her name is Irit, okay? Her name is Irit, and I'm just going to check one thing before I share this with you. Here we are. Okay, and Irit is going to talk about what she makes here in the shuk. This is Irit. Irit makes the best Yemenite lachuch. Sarah Cooper. Irit makes the best Yemenite lachuch in the whole shuk. Irit, tagidi shalom. And Jeff has a message straight for you guys, just for this gala.
Hi Philadelphia, I love you. Come to Israel, and I miss Philadelphia to AMHSI chocolate. Come
Exactly.
soon to Israel. I want to see you.
Woohoo! So done. I just realized now, I'm going to show you this video of the hummus again. I'm thinking now that that you couldn't hear the sound before. I'm going to show you the hummus one more time. I'll get back to Yemen in just 1 second.
So we take our hand like this, and we realize that we put it underneath the plate. We pick up the plate just a little. Now we don't come in a usual situation like this. We try to bring our wrist a little to here. That way we get everything that the hummus offers us. And then we really go like this, and we bring our mouth to the food together. And that's the taste of Israel.
Come back to Yemen and Irit. So I'm just going to talk about Yemen for just 1 second. Just want to check what's happening in the chat really quickly. Okay, awesome. Just making sure everything's okay. So when we talk about Yemen, guys, and this is again very special to me as an Israeli, but also, believe it or not, to anyone who's from Philadelphia. This is the story of how the Yemenite Jews eventually were brought to Israel. So you have to understand the situation. Israel is in the 1950s, bankrupt, devastated by war. The situation is really, I mean, we were really essentially a third world country. And despite that, David Ben-Gurion ordered and said, we have to begin the ingathering of the Jewish exiles. We have to begin bringing the Jews home. And we're going to start with the impoverished community of Yemen. And so amazingly, a lot of people don't know this, but it ended up being that there were 380 flights that brought 48,000 Yemenite Jews. Okay, take a look at some of these amazing pictures of these Yemenites coming to Israel. They packed these planes, And what's so amazing about this, by the way, for Americans, is that the airline that brought the Yemenite Jews to Israel, who brought these people? This was Alaska Airlines, believe it or not. Alaska Airlines got involved in this via the head of the company at the time, for various reasons, funded by the JDC, the Joint Distribution Committee. Anyway, Alaskan Airlines came, brought these Yemenite Jews over. Like I said, 380 flights, 50,000 people almost. And what's really incredible, I mean, there's stories about these Yemenites. They came from Yemen. They didn't know anything about technology. They saw these planes and they thought, oh my God, what could this possibly be? We heard that God is supposed to bring us back to Israel on the wings of eagles. Maybe this is that eagle. Maybe this giant metal machine is that eagle. People, I mean, the people that were on the ground really said that the Yemenites actually believed that maybe it was a metaphor. And these Yemenites who didn't know anything, they were cold on the flight. One of the flights, they were cold. And if you're cold and you're from a place like Yemen in the 1950s, what do? You light a fire. And that's what they did on the plane. And quickly somebody came and put it out and everything was okay. Nothing happened, thank God. But it just goes to show how amazing, how much times have changed and what it must have been like for people that came out of, this incredibly, at the time, primitive country. It's not so different now, unfortunately. Primitive country and getting on a plane for the first time. And amazingly, this is really amazing, I think, this is still going on to a certain extent. This is 2016, guys, where another Yemenite family, there's actually still a few Jewish families left in Yemen, very, very few. And one of them, a big family, made Aliyah in 2016. As we know, the civil war has been raging in Yemen for quite some time, and life for anyone in Yemen is difficult, but for Jews under the Muslim fundamentalist Houthis has become extremely difficult. So one of the last families was actually snuck out of Yemen by Israel's Mossad. And in addition to the family coming, they managed to bring this as well. This is a Torah that's 500 years old, 500-year-old Yemenite Torah that they managed to sneak into Israel. And of course, it's really one of the most amazing artifacts that's ever come out of the Jewish community in Yemen. I want to mention one more thing. I wonder if anyone can guess why I bring this picture up when I'm talking about Yemen. But the reason is that the official name for the operation for bringing the Yemenite Jews to Israel is called Operation on Eagle's Wings. And it just so happens that in February, I believe it was, or the end of January, in 2017, the week before the Eagles played the Patriots in the Super Bowl, in fact, it was the very parsha that mentions the verse, Al Kanfei Nesharim, on wings of eagles. It's the only mention in the entire Bible of the word eagle. And the very next day, Super Bowl Sunday, our Philadelphia Eagles went and upset the New England Patriots for our only Super Bowl victory ever. I don't know. To me, there must be a God. Otherwise, how could that have possibly happened? And that's, of course, why I showed you Nick Foles in 2017 when we're talking about Yemenite Jews. I now want to move on. I want to move on from Yemen, and we're going to quickly go to a place called Tunisia. Okay, in this Tunisia, they have an incredible food called burika. The food, by the way, that we mentioned, I got a little ahead of myself, but the food from Yemen was called lachouch. My friend Irit was basically frying up lachouch Yemenite pastries. We'll go back to Yemenites in just a few minutes, but essentially Yemenite pita is a whole different situation. It's a whole different story in terms of pita, much different. And I highly recommend trying Yemenite lachouch or the other one called saluf next time you come to Israel. But this is something else. This is called burika. Okay, burika comes out of Tunisia. I'm going to show you the guy that cooks it because he's a real character. Everyone knows him in the shuk. Let's take a look at him, and then we'll talk about this burika, what it means, and a bit about Jews in Tunisia. So this is Kobe, and Kobe has been screaming and yelling in the shuk for about 10 years. But what people don't know about Kobe until you get to talk to the guy is that he's the third generation of Tunisian in his family that's been making this burika and screaming and yelling in the shuk. This is his grandmother's stall. And his father worked there after his grandmother, and now he works there. Okay, this is decades of this family screaming and yelling in the shuk, burika, which is essentially fried dough with either potato or egg or various other fillings you could put inside, but it's a really unique version of fried dough coming out of Tunisia. I'll just show you another minute of the clip so you can see what it looks like. And that's Kobe, again, someone who's been the third generation family making this food. And now I want to talk for a few minutes about Tunisia. Tunisia is a really remarkable Jewish community. First of all, no one really knows when exactly the community in Tunisia started, but we can assume it's something. So the earliest is possibly King Solomon, might be with the destruction of the first temple, 586. We're not totally clear. I'm going to jump to this picture, though. This is 1911. And the reason I jumped to this picture is this is actually a Zionist camp in Tunisia in 1911. And 1911 is the year that the Tunisian community became openly Zionist and started raising money for, guess who? The JNF in 1911. And so these Tunisian Zionists, in fact, were raising money for the JNF more than 100 years ago. 110 years ago is when it began. And I just want to mention that eventually, with the turning point for the Jews in Tunisia is going to be 1945. The Nazis, of course, will go across northern Africa. People don't often realize that the Holocaust did touch North African Jews as well. Not to the same extent, of course, as Europe, but it did touch the North African Jews. Tunisian Jews were sent to labor camps and concentration camps. And eventually, that was the beginning. 1945 is going to be the beginning, or excuse me, 1943 when they arrived, the beginning of a lot of persecution. First the Nazis, then Israel's created, and the Tunisian government begins persecuting its Jews. And so Jews in Tunisia eventually decide that most of them are going to leave. Not all, there are still some Jews in Tunisia even today, but very, very few. But this man is a really inspiring story. Named Asher Mizrahi, one of the spiritual leaders of the community in Tunisia. He made Aliyah in 1967, early 1967. He then, this is a situation where he's basically going to arrive, he didn't know this, but right before the 6-Day War. He's going to pass away right after the 6-Day War, meaning this is a man who grew up as basically a second-class citizen. It's called being dhimmi status in a Muslim country as a Jew. He grew up a second-class citizen his entire life, was a spiritual leader of the Jews in that country for many, many, many years. And then right when he comes to Israel, almost just within 6 months of him arriving, he's going to witness this amazing moment, which of course is the 6-Day War, the liberation of the Kotel in Jerusalem, the reuniting of Jerusalem. Jews can go to the Kotel for the first time in 20 years, but really freely for the first time in 2,000 years. And imagine what it was like for this man who grew up as, in a place where Jews really couldn't act as Jews openly without being treated as second-class citizens. And then, of course, coming to Israel, witnessing this with his own eyes, and shortly afterwards passing away. And basically his lasting memory as a Jew before he died was the liberation of the Kotel and Jerusalem in 1967. I think it's pretty amazing. I also want to mention this woman, and her name is Habiba Masika. Habiba Masika is in the 1920s, was one of the most famous singers and actresses anywhere in the world. She was a Tunisian Jew, which I think is pretty remarkable. First of all, that a Jewish woman, think about this, is like in the 1920s, this is levels of being, unfortunately, I hate to use this term, but basically levels of being a second-class citizen. She wasn't only a woman in a Muslim country in the 1920s, she was a Jewish woman in a Muslim country in the 1920s. She became an amazing singer. They called her Habiba, which means beloved, or basically beloved in Arabic, because everyone loved her, everyone. She had the voice like an angel. She wasn't only a singer, she was an actress. And eventually she's going to perform as a Tunisian in Arabic all across Europe. Paris, Nice, Berlin, Vienna, Monte Carlo, you name it. She performed. She was really one of the most famous actresses and singers in the world in the 1920s. I also want to mention about her, though, that she was a real barrier breaker and a glass ceiling breaker in her own time. She demanded higher wages, basically to be paid equally to the men that she performed with. This is 100 years, think about it, before this came out in show business, and basically in the last 5 years when female actresses are all of a sudden, basically it becomes a huge deal that they're not making nearly as much as their male counterparts. She was demanding this in the 1920s in Tunisia and in Europe, which is pretty incredible. She also demanded to have she essentially wouldn't let anyone tell her what to do in terms of her love life. She was a real glass ceiling breaker. And in many ways, we can think about, if we remember the hashtag Me Too movement, which began a couple of years ago. It started with actresses, with female actresses talking about their experiences and what that meant being a female actress. In many ways, I don't think that most people know this, but they're really following in the footsteps of this amazing Tunisian Jewish woman from the 1920s, Habiba Masika. I'll briefly mention, I'll move on from Tunisia now and show you another character in the shuk. This guy is selling kebab. And most people don't understand that the origins of kebab are very, very varied. Let's take a look at this man for a second and how he sells his kebabs. This is just the best part about going to the shuk, is everyone screaming at you, the sights, the sounds, the smells. I love it. And this guy his name is also Kobe, and he, believe it or not, also Kobe, Kebab Kobe, and he, guys, is from Romania. Now, I want to talk about Romanian Jews just very, very, very briefly. Okay, it's for lack of time, I'm gonna go through this one fast. But essentially, Romanian Jews who survived the Holocaust ended up in the Soviet Union. Now, that was a pretty miserable way to survive the Holocaust. If you survive the Holocaust, you end up in the Soviet Union, you're essentially still being oppressed. And so the state of Israel ended up paying, at the time, which is 1950s, $13 million. That was a huge sum back then. Half of it, though, was paid in sheep and other farm animals. We actually are going to buy Holocaust survivors and pay for them with farm animals, mostly sheep, in order to get them out of Romania, which was at that point post-World War II, the Soviet Union, and come to Israel. And his father was one of these people. His father started that stand, and now he, of course, stands there where his father used to stand. Again, another example of the stalls in the shuk really being passed down generation through generation, really perfecting the foods. And that's the Romanian kebab, called frigarui, is what it's called, the Romanian style kebab. Basically, every country has its kebab. Even Americans have what we call meatballs, but frigarui is the most famous kebab that there is in Tel Aviv, and that comes out of Romania. I want to show you now, this is one of the most amazing pastries. Okay, we're moving on to the country of Hungary. Okay, Hungary, and this is called kiortush. Kiortush means chimney cake. Okay, and the reason is because this is what it looks like. Okay, it's this hollowed out cylinder. Essentially, they roll it on this spit, roast it over coals, and they can flavor it with all kinds of incredible things. Anyone here that's Hungarian knows that Hungarians are all about their pastries. There's something like 35 famous pastries that come out of Hungary. This, I think, is just the most interesting one, and you can find it in the Shuk Carmel, again called kiortush, and that comes out of Hungary. So when we speak about Hungary, I think most people would want me to talk about a woman named Hannah Senesh. I'll talk about her briefly in a minute, but again, kind of like Eli Cohen, I really can't do Hannah Senesh justice in under 15 minutes. So I'll mention her briefly, but I do want to tell you the story here of Olga and Pearl Gluck, two women also from Hungary. Okay, and this is a bit of a personal story, not for myself, but this is my best friend's great-grandmother. Okay, that's Olga was her great-grandmother, and Pearl is her sister. I guess it's great-great-aunt, I believe. But essentially, the story of Olga and Pearl, two sisters who were basically inseparable throughout their lives. They lived in a small town outside Budapest, and essentially what's going to happen is Olga, who was basically always older, much healthier, it was essentially, she had a much easier life in almost every single way. Olga is going to be sent off to work, okay, where she doesn't then see her sister for quite some time. During that quite some time, the Nazis will come in, and by 1944, the Jews, she couldn't get home, she couldn't get back, because basically you had the government of Hungary collaborating with the Nazis. In 1944, they're going to send all the Hungarian Jews to various camps, mostly Auschwitz, where Auschwitz was basically the graveyard, essentially, the place of death for so many Hungarian Jews. Olga and Pearl, Olga went from camp to camp to camp throughout the entire Holocaust, always looking for her sister, asking people from her town, have you seen anyone from my town? Have you maybe seen, and she's constantly looking for her sister. And only at the end of the Holocaust in 1944, she gets to Auschwitz. She immediately, on her first day, finds someone from her town who says, you're not gonna believe, she didn't even have to ask, you're not gonna believe this, but Pearl's here, but she's dying. You have to come quick. And essentially, very, very quickly, she found her sister. She hadn't seen her, this is the first time she'd seen her in 4 years, okay? And she convinced others to help her keep Pearl alive. And that's what they're gonna do. They literally gave up, this is Auschwitz, think about that. They gave up their own rations to keep Olga's younger sister Pearl alive. They even bribed Nazis to basically give them potato skins and other remnants of food that were from the kitchen. she would do things like slap her cheeks during the roll calls to make them look rosier, so the Nazis wouldn't basically pick her out and send her to her death. And amazingly, they made it to liberation. They make it to liberation, and Pearl can at this point barely walk. Olga's going to be carrying her at times, carrying her from place to place, but eventually she manages to come back to health. They both survived. This is both of them. I'll show you a picture here. They both end up essentially living into their 90s. And they were essentially inseparable. They never went more than a few days. Starting in 1944, when they were reunited in Auschwitz, they never went more than a few days without seeing each other until Olga passed away in 2006. And again, that's one of my best friend's great-grandmothers. So I think it's really, these stories are incredible. Chana Senesh, again, for lack of time, I'm going to skip Chana Senesh right now. The most famous and amazing story of any paratrooper in Israel's history is Chana Senesh. I recommend that everyone learn that story, and maybe some other day I'd love to tell you it. But again, to do it justice, I think I probably need 15 minutes. But that's Chana Senesh, also the most amazing heroine and incredible woman, also from Hungary. I'm just going to mention two more things before we finish up in about 2 minutes. Number one, guys, is for all you coffee lovers, okay? Everybody loves coffee. The Shukha Carmel has an amazing, amazing, amazing treat. This guy opened up a giant coffee shop, looks really, really beautiful, but he opened it up right across the street from this coffee shop, which looks like a tiny little hole in the wall. But what people don't realize is this coffee shop called Tamati Coffee was once on Rothschild Boulevard. This is Mickey Parrott. He's the most famous barista in all of Tel Aviv. He decided to leave the fancy area of Rothschild Boulevard to put his coffee shop in the middle of the shuk, where he could actually sit and talk to people and really get in with the community. And that's what he did. And so I went in to talk to Mickey Parrott, and I asked him to say a word to my friends in Philadelphia. So here, this is again the most famous coffee maker in all of Tel Aviv, with his little secret hole coffee that only the locals know about. I'm just going to play for you what he had to say. What's up, guys? I'm here in Tamati Coffee with the famous Mickey Parrott. This is the best coffee in Tel Aviv by far. Mickey, want to give us a mashu?
Hey guys, I'm Mickey. I'm waiting for you here. Don't forget, when you come from Philly, you come to Cafe Tamati, the best place in...
And we're just about the end of our tour. I actually have a dessert section too, but we're gonna run out of time. So this was my hunt for dessert, going through this amazing neighborhood in Tel Aviv called Kerem Temanim, the Yemenite vineyard. This is me getting to my cookies. I was really excited, but I want to now get to the end of the tour, which is this. As I was finishing up the tour, I went to the top of the market, and here's my students on the left, my American students. And I'm just gonna play for this video quickly, and this is where I'm gonna sum everything up. Just take a look at this. What I think really encompasses what the modern state of Israel, and especially Tel Aviv, is really all about. And why do I love that so much? Because where else in the world can you have an African immigrant, an African refugee immigrant, singing soul music, a bunch of American Jews dancing to it, these American Jews who only 2 minutes earlier were putting on their tefillin with an Israeli Chabad rabbi, asking everyone to put on tefillin, and you have this mix of these American Jews, Israeli Jews, religious, secular, African immigrants. When my students, when they come to Israel, when you guys come to Israel, you get to eat. When we talk about the culinary aspect, you're eating, you know, a German schnitzel on a French baguette with Egyptian hummus and Yemenite schlug, Yemenite harif, and all these amazing groups of Jews that came from Tunisia and Romania and Iraq and Yemen and Hungary, and they all came to Israel and formed this amazing country with an amazing culture. And of course, one of the best parts of the culture for all of us, we all know this, is the food. And the best place to sample Israeli food is the Carmel Market. So I want to thank everyone so much for inviting me here and listening to me. I really hope that I can take you on this tour in person really, really soon when this insanity is over. But please, I hope I allowed you to feel a little bit like you're back in Israel. And please, 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 as soon as COVID's done, which will hopefully be soon enough, come visit us. I'd love to take you on this tour for real. So I'm going to pass it over. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to pass it over to Jackie. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciated being here. Thank you guys. Jackie.
Thanks, Danny, for that fun and informative virtual shuk experience. You're a passionate and engaging speaker, and I have no doubt your students must love learning from you. I'm sure your parents are very proud of you, not only for your role in Jewish and Israeli education, but also for this event that they are with us tonight. Welcome, Gary and Judy Stein. I have attended many online and in-person lectures and tours offered by staff at the Alexander Muss High School over the years, and am envious of the Muss alumni, students, and future students for the most unique hands-on learning opportunity to better understand Israel, its history, and the history of the Jewish people. We learned about Muss from a friend, Joe Wilson, who has been involved with the school since the merger of the JNF and AMHSI 7 years ago. Russell Robinson, this JNF CEO, believed in exposing young Jewish students to the wonder of Israel at an early age. Our two older daughters received their entire Dallas-based schooling at Jewish day schools. However, our son Joel had missed on that opportunity and was schooled mostly at secular institutions before coming to Philadelphia. We felt that there was a void in Joel's appreciation for our heritage as compared to our girls, and offered him the Muss experience. He returned from a semester in Israel with a renewed understanding of the land and of our people, and enthusiastically shared his experiences with friends and public audiences. Dale and I were grateful to the JNF for exposing us to Muss, and have since become more involved in the JNF, with me being asked to join the AMHSI National Board. I am fortunate to see firsthand what JNF does in Israel, and how the Alexander Muss High School in Israel utilizes its Israel Studies curriculum, along with its talented educators, to teach students from all over the world the history of the Jews and Israel while using the land as a classroom. This is all to ensure that our students come back after their abroad experience as confident and powerful advocates for Israel. We know that all of you on the call have supported Jewish National Fund's work in the past, for which we are truly grateful. You are an important member of our community and hope that you will continue to support Israel by either renewing or increasing your gift, whether that's contributing to the Alexander Muss High School or another of our deserving projects. Your support enables us to ensure a viable future for Israel, whether in prosperous times or during pandemics. Please get in touch with our local director, Samantha, who can answer questions about the campaign or your gift this year. We will be hosting more virtual events similar to this, and you will be receiving information with links to join us in the next few months. I hope you've enjoyed this evening, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Take care.